I have the privilege of networking with other creative agencies from around the world who share my values. One of those guys is Tyler Pigott. I reached out to Tyler and asked him if he would share his insight into how he's built a thriving business while maintaining a fully remote staff. And I'm not lying, it is a fully remote staff. How did he do it? Why did he do it? We'll also talk about what he believes the pros and cons are of maintaining a fully remote business with over 30 employees. I have no doubt that y'all are going to get a ton of value out of this conversation. I'm your host, Clay Vaughn, and I'm best known as the CEO of Reverent, a full-service agency that helps you market your business and share your story. If you're tired of letting your leads slip through the cracks, then I think you should take a listen to this quick message from our show sponsor, Rocket Fuel.
When small businesses let their leads slip through the cracks, their top-line revenue suffers. Over the years, Rocket Fuel's all-in-one CRM software has helped thousands of small business owners organize and automate their communications so that nothing slips through the cracks and their top-line capacity can grow. So, schedule a demo today at www.rocketfuel.software. You can stop losing leads and instead close more sales with half the effort.
All right, everybody. Well, welcome back to another episode of Good Business. I am so excited to have Tyler Pigott from Loan for Creative joining in this morning. And I know that y'all are going to really walk away with a ton of tangible value. And we're going to be talking about one of the things that many business owners refuse to admit and accept, which is, frankly, that we live in a remote culture. And as society has changed, as our culture has shifted, and expectations of business owners and leaders have changed, we need to figure out a way to walk through this and navigate it where we're still profitable, still running a good business, and still adding value to our team members, but also rolling with the changes. And so the reason I asked Tyler on is, first off, Tyler and I, we've connected through the Story Brand community of agencies, and Tyler runs a fantastic creative agency out of the Pacific Northwest, and I'll let him share more about that. But we also share values. We share our love for the Lord, and we share our passion for serving others, and really just trying to make the world a better place. And so that's one of the reasons I'm really excited about this conversation. And also, we've internally at Reverent struggled with this topic of being a remote culture, and it's something I've bumped up against, and we've come up with strategies to navigate and try to kind of appease, but I don't know if there's been a good thing that I've settled on yet. And so I'm excited to hear from Tyler about how he's done it. And so I'll stop talking and give it over to Tyler to give a little bit of feedback and info on who he is. And Tyler, thank you for joining.
I love it. Thanks for having me. I feel like I keyed in on, like you said, a ton of tangible takeaways in the beginning intro, and that's a lot of pressure. So I really, I hope I can live up to that. But yeah, no, thanks for having me.
I just had to go with the alliteration.
Yeah, totally. For sure, I would echo, everything you kind of said in the intro, just about connecting with you over the years, and I feel like there's a lot of commonalities, and if we live next door to each other, we'd probably hang out a fair amount. So It's super fun thanks for having me. It's great.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Tyler, let's just dive right on, and we'll have a chance to give a little bit more information about Loan for in a minute, but just so that we can dive into this topic of running a remote business, can you give a little background as to your journey with that?
Yeah, for sure. I like to think that I knew years ago that there was going to be a pandemic and a global shutdown of everything, and no one would ever want to go in an office again. And so that's why I started. No, I did not start a remote company that way. So I started the organization kind of late 2014, early 2015. And kind of came out of about 8 to 10 years in kind of the corporate space, worked for some investment groups, launching consumer products across the country and stuff. And I kind of, to be honest, I swung the pendulum, if you will. So I was working a ton, flying a ton, would, leave on Monday mornings and oftentimes be gone all week in numerous cities and stuff, and had young kids at the spot at that time. And so for me, I kind of probably swung to the opposite. It was like, man, if I could just figure out a job where I could live in my basement, that'd be awesome. And so that was, part of or one of the variables I could say as far as like jumping into a remote organization. I'll talk about some of these things I think probably throughout, but one of the things as well that was a kind of factor in it is I grew up in a family business. And so my dad started a business the year I was born. I think it was the year I was born. He started a vocational school. And so if you rewind back to I was an 80s kid. And if you rewind back to that time period, there was not really any computers that were really in the work environment in corporate cultures. And so oftentimes people had to go back to school to get those skills to figure out, the basics of word processing and spreadsheets and much of that type of thing. And so he started a school or a vocational school, was kind of up and down the West Coast. I think they got up to about 550, 600 employees at one point.
Wow.
So a large organization. And I got to watch that. Like I had a front row seat for that, and it lasted for about 25 years. And there were some awesome things from it, and it was super cool to watch. There was also some things that were a little bit challenging to watch, and one of those that I watched with my family was when you employ that many people, you oftentimes will see them all the time. Grocery stores, churches, walking down the street. And so there really isn't, I watched my dad not really get to have an off switch for years.
Yeah.
And he would travel between campuses and all those types of things. Wow. And so, but at the same standpoint, even in our local, like hometown, there was numerous employees for where the HQ was. And so I think, part of that rubbed off in the positive and part of that rubbed off in the negative. But the idea of being able to run a business and have an unplug is super interesting to me. And it continues to be challenging. And obviously people potentially listening are like, well, dude, you run a remote company. You have no unplug now. But I also can. It's just a discipline of when you're going to choose to engage and not. And so, but when you're at the grocery store, it's actually just really fun to see people in your community and have a little bit of a different, I guess, kind of just function in the community than be known for hey, he runs a business and his building's over there and this is what Tyler does. And that's how it's described versus probably most people in the community. I run an invisible business. Nobody really knows what I do. The close ones do, they're in the internal kind of or inside kind of network, but at the same standpoint, lots of people don't. And so that's probably some of like the backbone or like the mindset or mentality that kind of came out of it. And then, so I hired my first employee. They were actually local. And then they decided to chase a girl and move to Phoenix. And we kind of were like, how does this work? Could we do these things on Zoom or, cause Zoom did exist before the pandemic.
What?
To those of you. Yeah, I know.
What
it's
a concept.
Crazy. I've been a paying customer since 2015, anyway. And so we tried to kind of figure out, like, that was a little bit of the, introductory or I guess guinea pig, if you will. He's now married to that girl. They've got kids together. I think they've been married for 6 or 7 years now. It's super fun. No longer works with me, but obviously constantly cheering for him. So that was kind of like the intro to it a little bit of like, how does this work? Can this work? Do I like this? And so I kind of got to dip my feet in before I decided, hey, this is the direction we want to go. And then pretty quick, so I live in the Seattle area, about an hour south of Seattle. And so in my backyard is, some people might've heard of a business called Amazon. Others maybe heard of a business called Microsoft, Starbucks, Boeing. I mean, so I've got all these massive organizations that, if I'm saying, hey, I'm going to write a job description to hire a brand strategist, so is Starbucks. And so probably I'm going to have a hard time competing with those benefits, with that pay scale, many of those types of things. And so pretty quickly it became a recruiting thing as well, as far as like finding talent. And it was really hard to compete just in this space, in this area, kind of in the industries and in the space that I was really hoping to kind of grow the business. So that's a lot of long-windedness, but that's kind of, some of the, 4 or 5 points as far as like just how I jumped into the remote world. And just kind of caveat for people listening, I run a remote company. It is not a hybrid remote. You're currently looking, if you're watching a video, you're currently looking at my office at my house. I don't have an HQ. There isn't a company building. This is built 100% based on people that work in either co-working spots. Some people don't have an office at home or whatever, employees wise, or they do have one at home, and it's kind of we're connected digitally, and that's about it. So it's a
Wow.
fully remote
And
organization, which is
and
crazy.
how many people are on staff for you right now, roughly?
Yeah, 35 ish.
Okay.
Yeah,
So that's a lot of people to have HR time with, virtually,
yeah,
and be very intentional with. So I'm excited to get
yeah.
to one of my questions in a little bit, about how you wrangle that. It sounds like you're a very disciplined person, just
Yeah,
based off of everything that I know about you. I know you're a
yeah.
disciplined person, but structure is important for you, right?
For sure. Yeah, yeah, 100%.
So, would you say that, um, being remote requires you to be have more structure or less? Because I think one of the common misconceptions is
Hmm.
remote is just tied to, oh yeah, you use Slack and you communicate over Slack and you get the job done. Kind of one of the perks, I guess you would say, for employees is, oh, work when you want, all that kind of stuff. What kind of structure do you have for a business that has 30 plus employees remotely?
Yeah, no, it is a great question. I think you're totally right. That is one of the misconceptions, if you will, of oftentimes, at least early on. And I'll even go back to like pre-pandemic. One of the questions oftentimes was, "Do you guys actually work? Like, how do you get work done? How does this work? Do you guys wear like anything besides pajamas? Like,
Yeah, it's like homeschoolers.
um, yeah, totally, 100%. And it's funny though. Homeschool is a great example because now I would say it's a commonality to know people that are homeschooled, kids that are homeschooled, families that are
Yeah.
participating in that. Versus, I grew up actually being homeschooled for the first, like, I don't know, 3 or 4 years of
Oh,
my kind
cool.
of secondary education.
Yeah.
At that point, yeah, right. I mean, finding curriculum was impossible, and other people doing it was impossible, and you kind of just were looked at weird. So, it is definitely it's changed. Remote world has changed. Yeah, I would say like it requires about 10 times the amount of structure,
Hmm.
because if you think about, like, most people are familiar with office kind of culture, in office culture, and you can, hey, whatever person's name is, how are we doing on this project? As you walked by, because you just went out and got a sandwich and came back and you saw they were sitting in their desk or sitting at their,
Yeah.
conference table or so, whatever. I don't get that. That doesn't exist.
Hmm.
I only function based on initiative. And so I have to take my own initiative to reach out to people and have, you constantly are working on your communication, because I don't have the time to write a novel to talk to
Hmm.
someone. Whereas you can walk by and talk to somebody, give context, read body language, all that kind of thing. And so there's a lot of structure around just kind of communication plans, and
Wow.
internal and external, and what those expectations are, and when you get an email from someone, when you should respond, and how you use Slack, and how you would use maybe a project management tool in
Hmm.
combination to, just there's so many different processes that we've created. And I probably spent an hour. Yeah, well, I did spend an hour a day. I literally grabbed my iPhone, set the timer for an hour, turned everything off, and just documented how things were done. And that was
Wow.
probably end of 2017, all of 2018. And at that point, it was like bullet points, right? It was just like, well,
Mm.
we do things this way, and then we do things this way. Now we've progressed, and I bet we have about 300 different templates or processes, SOPs, if you will, that describe what we do. And some of them are pages and pages and pages long, and others are 2 paragraphs kind of thing. So
Right.
we do have a lot of systems, a lot of process for creating that. And then I would just say, like, it's the importance of over communicating is part
Mm.
of our structure. And then I already said this, but initiative, you kind of do have to schedule things. It's like, we were talking HR and a little bit ago, and it was, we were getting ready to let somebody go, and sometimes that's a super sensitive topic, and a
Yeah.
sensitive area for lots of different environments, no matter if you're in person or not. But it's also really challenging to go, well, are they going to be around? Yeah, I know you want to do it at this hour or this time or this day. Will they be around? Are they working? Are they out
Mm.
grabbing their kids at school? Are they, like, there's so
Yeah.
many different factors that you do have to kind of work through when you are remote. But a lot of it just goes to, hey, you just have to think before you're doing it, and kind of come up with a plan, and then you have to run that plan. So
Mm.
um, Yeah, I don't know if that answers that question, but
Yeah, it
there's a lot.
does.
There's so much structure. Yeah.
Yeah. So in other words, what I'm hearing is if you want to have a remote business, you've got to have an enormous amount of structure, an enormous amount of discipline, um, as a leader and as a leadership team, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And that discipline has to be funneled into intentionality with your team and
Yeah.
intentionality with those standard operating procedures. Is that kind of the bulk of it?
Yeah. No, for sure. I think it's interesting because one of the things that like my personality, I'm like a mix of a ability. I'm a visionary, but then can also put legs to vision. And so
Yeah,
that's awesome when you're like a 1 or 2 or 5 person company. It's not
sure.
awesome when you're not and you need other people to do it and you just need to be the visionary aspect of it or whatever.
Yeah.
But part of that for me, the discipline kicks in when someone will respond. This, I mean, I still do this now, and I had to discipline myself to do this for years. And it was when someone asks a question, you'll oftentimes have to find a link to an SOP, post it in there, and go, "Hey, can you read this and let me know if you have any questions?"
Hmm.
That's harder than just answering the question,
Yeah.
but it trains people to like rely on process, rely on your
Hmm.
structure in this case. And so like there's that discipline of really thinking through like that classic, short term gain, long term pain kind of moment. And I was really way more interested in the short term pain, long term gain. And so for
Hmm.
me, I've just always been a longer term, bigger picture thinker, totally fine if it hurts now because I know it won't ideally in years to come
Yeah.
kind of thing. And so that was a lot of the thing is you kind of have to walk your talk. You can't do the easy route most of the time because it just means that it's going to rely on me. It's going to rely on
Hmm.
or my leadership team or supervisor or whatever versus allowing and kind of pushing team members to kind of run with their own type of thing and rely on the structure you've created. So that's the kind of the
Hmm.
discipline thing that kicks into it. And it's not always fun. And oftentimes I have to apologize and go, shoot, I answered that question. I know I should have done this. Can you make sure you look at this, SOP and
Yeah.
tell me if there's anything we should change, So I'm definitely not perfect at it.
No, that's great. That's great. And it's good to kind of see behind the scenes. So I appreciate you sharing that. So
Yeah.
when it comes to like the pros and cons, I mean, everybody's going to create a list
Mm.
based off of the kind of business. I mean, if
Yeah.
you're a gas station, well, it's kind of hard to be fully remote. I mean,
Yeah.
like people have to be able to park and fill up their tanks. Um, so I guess my question to you, just in the context of running a creative agency,
Mm.
um, you mentioned that you're not hybrid, which means that there's literally no place for anyone to go work. Do you
Yeah.
ever spend any time in person with your team? And I know that y'all have recently had some structural changes in the past year or so.
Yeah.
um, so I mean, if you want to talk about what you're trying to do versus what you have done, that's fine too, but I'd
Sure.
love just to kind of know from the perspective of running a fully remote company, what
Yeah.
level of intentionality do you have for any in person, if any, and why?
Yeah. Yeah, it is really interesting because I would say for most people that know me and Clay, you'd probably be in this circle would be like, huh, he seems to like people and he likes to be around
He's
people.
not a hermit.
This is weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it is really funny. I love being around people. The weird part about my personality is I do love to be around people, and I hate being at home all the time. And so I literally will make up reasons of I think I need to run to Home Depot really fast
Yeah.
and you're like, just to get out of the house, to be around people. I oftentimes have to schedule that. And so I do have
Yeah.
a discipline, like every week I try to meet with 3 people outside of my office.
Okay.
Sometimes they're clients, sometimes it's friends grabbing a drink together. Sometimes it's, my parents actually live close by, and actually later this afternoon, I'm going to grab a beer with my dad. And
Oh,
so,
cool.
like I try to do those types of things because it requires that from me because I want to be around people. And so it is back to, again, that intentionality of how do you want your life to kind of be organized. As far as kind of like team dynamics and in-person team stuff and that kind of thing, we try to do a yearly retreat.
Okay.
And so we fly everybody to the same city. And, I guess over the last couple of years, it's been kind of funny how that's worked. But
Hmm.
some years we've done like just all, grab a bunch of Airbnbs that are all kind of close and people to get divided up and are in different houses. And then you got maybe a bigger house that everybody's meeting in and doing some stuff together, team building stuff together, activities and stuff together. And so we've tried to do those types of things regularly. And then we also try to do like a secondary thing for each person to have maybe they're going to a conference and like all the AM team will go to that conference or something, or the creative
Right.
team will go to that conference. And so then there's kind of 2 times a year when everyone's together one, and then a team dynamic just as far as the department might be together at a different type of an event. Um, I think one of the things I've learned a ton is you got to learn and you have to be super understanding and you have to know your people.
Mm.
Because one of the things about fully remote is that it's really been confusing in the last, I'll call it 3 years, because people got pushed into being remote. And so there's so many people that I talk to that, how do you run your staff meetings? Because, man, I'm just trying to run our staff meetings. They don't work. And I go, well, did you just try to run your staff meeting like you did when you were all standing in a room and you just tried to do that on Zoom? Well, yeah. Yeah, it makes sense. That wouldn't work that way because you guys were all in person and now you're not, And so
Right.
you have to really flip everything on its head and go, oh, this is a remote staff. And so most of the people that have stuck in our culture are people that want to work remotely. And
Mhm.
so it's not that they hate people. It's not that they don't want to talk to anyone, sit in the corner in the dark. Like that's none of that. Everyone on our staff's incredible. Like they're super
Mm.
personable on video. They love, problem solving, love being around clients. They just have chosen that they either want to be able to move on a regular basis or want to be close to their family, and there's no jobs close to their family because they live really remote Wisconsin or something.
Mhm.
And that's great. And they're incredible people, super talented, but they really just want to work remotely. And so
Right.
one of the things you kind of have to know is that some of those people actually aren't interested in being together as an
Mm.
organization. They're totally fine being on Zoom, and that's their thing. And so one of the things we learned with kind of, saying, hey, we're doing like a company retreat and everyone's flying there, not everyone's going to want to go. And you
Yeah.
can, and you kind of have to be okay with that, because you have to go, well, that's because they signed up for remote. That's their jam. They
Yeah.
love it. They're in. It's awesome for them. You're creating a culture and creating a team that they get excited about. But it doesn't always work that way where you're like,
Mm.
oh, everyone is required to be in person or whatever. And so I would say it's been interesting to kind of figure that out. It's changed in different seasons of the business as far as, what we're doing and how we're, bringing people together and that type of thing. But we're kind of just always on that mindset, of the mentality of just being together. And so
Yeah.
sometimes that's happy hours, and it's happy hours based on time zones, and somebody's planning it. And a couple of weeks ago, we did like a scavenger hunt through the Smithsonian, which you can do because
Oh,
that's all like
fun.
virtual. And so then everyone gets like a PDF, and here's all the things you're finding, and everyone breaks into Zoom rooms, and it's like, okay, come back, who did it fastest? And you're
Yeah.
just doing super creative things, and that part's been super fun because some of them go great and others are just hilarious failures, and you just have to like kind of laugh at it
You
and
have to
go,
own it.
okay,
Yeah.
like we did this one a couple of years ago that was like 2020 Halloween, around 2020, and it was, how are you going to pass out your candy this year without touching or being around anybody, because you were
Yeah.
trying to distance and all that kind of stuff. And so then it was, okay, you got 13 minutes, go make a video, create an invention. And then people came back and it was like, candy on a skateboard, then push it out. Or somebody did like put candy in their like blower, like leaf blower, and then like shot it everywhere. And like, people made contraptions with pulleys, and,
Yeah.
and so it's like, you're just basically going, hey, we're a remote company, and this is how we roll. And it's not right for everybody. And you kind of,
Yeah.
the faster you can kind of go, all right, we're trying to find the right people in the right seats, the same way you would in person. It's
Right.
just, it's just a different frame of mind that might be a little bit new comparatively to people's experience.
Yeah.
So,
That's so interesting.
anyway, yeah,
No, I love that. Thank you. So when you think about just kind of the things that you're getting flexibility personally, and you're
yep,
attracting a kind of person that would want to join a team that has flexibility.
yeah,
Um, what other perks come along with that you've seen in comparison with what your corporate job looked like prior to
yeah.
starting your business? What are some of the benefits of going remote? And then I want to talk a little bit about kind of things that maybe you wish you had too. So,
Totally. Yeah. I would say like freedom of time has been the biggest thing. You kind of
mhm,
mentioned that flexibility and stuff. Like, my kids leave for school about 7:55, and
mhm,
I'm hanging out with them all morning, helping them get ready, making lunches, pushing them out the door, kind of thing.
yeah,
And I have calls at 8. Well, reality is there's not too many businesses that you get to be less than 5 minutes away from your. I mean,
Yeah.
I can be upstairs, and then it turns 8 o'clock, and I can walk downstairs and jump on a call. And so
Yeah.
that flexibility is pretty cool. I've enjoyed that. At least I've enjoyed the ability to kind of be able to travel a little bit, and
Hmm.
most people don't have any idea what. I mean, I think I've been on an airplane almost every other week this year,
Oh, wow.
and no one has any idea. Like, I mean, they do because they see it on a calendar, or maybe I'm not available because I'm flying or something, but you can take calls anywhere. There's not really any expectation. No one knows you're out of town. So again, there's pros and cons to all those things,
Yeah,
but
for
I've
sure.
enjoyed that because, you've got that flexibility from a time standpoint. And you can structure your life how you want it to. It's
Hmm.
not, you're not trying to squeeze in that run to the post office or to the doctor between 12 and 1 because that's your lunch break, or
Right.
after 5 when everything's closed or whatever, and you can have that kind of flexibility. um and I would say for me, like, not missing kids, like my kids stuff, like,
Hmm.
so one of my girls loves volleyball and plays a ton of volleyball, so I get to go to a lot of those games. Another one of our daughters does a lot with dance, and so she's a ballet company on point, all that kind of fun stuff, and she's incredible. But I get to take her to practice,
Yeah.
and I get to pick her up from practice. And as a parent, as many of you guys know that are listening to their parents, that time in the car is probably your most valuable time, whether it's
Mhm.
to and from a sports thing or it's to and from school or whatever. They remember what they did that day. You can ask them. There's reflection. There's actual kind of substance to conversation. And I really missed that when I didn't get to have it kind of in the
Yeah.
corporate space. So
No, that checks
yeah,
out.
there's some of that flexibility stuff, I guess, is probably the biggest. And then I would say just like client wise has been really fun because you don't really like, you can approach any client in the world. It doesn't matter. There
Well,
isn't like we only work in this geo and we only run billboards down this highway or whatever the thing is. And that part's been really fun for me because I've gotten to kind of build a network that's more nationwide than it is just kind of local to the community, and that's been really fun. So
that's
whether
cool.
that's a pro or a con, I don't know, but I've enjoyed it. So
Yeah. Do you find that you're traveling a lot to meet with those clients?
um,
Or
yeah,
are they bought into the fact that you're a remote business? Do they even know that you're
well,
a
it's a
remote
little bit of
business?
both.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, they know. Yeah, for sure. No, everybody knows. I would say it's a little bit of both.
Okay.
I think our really successful long-term clients start in person, and we'll fly a strategist and the marketing consultant, which is our AM kind of role,
Hmm.
to where they're at, and we'll do a strategy workshop for a day or a messaging workshop for a day or a brand strategy workshop for a day. And that's usually a really creative, successful way to start a relationship because,
Hmm.
oh, you're real people, you have legs or whatever, like you can tell they're below more than just a moving Zoom screen.
Yeah.
And those have been really cool. So we've done a bunch of those. I speak at different events and that kind of thing just for awareness. And so oftentimes that's what I'm at. And then I actually have business partners that aren't in the state of Washington. And so I'll see them on a regular basis, kind of once a month.
Gotcha.
And that was at least for the first year or two. So that's kind of usually where I'm on a plane to. As the organization's grown, I know everything going on. I just try really hard for the clients to not to be the bottleneck through clients. And
Right.
so I don't oftentimes spend a ton of time with clients right now, but
Gotcha.
I do enjoy it when I get to. So
Yeah. No, that's great.
yeah,
So, man, there's definitely a lot of pros, and it takes some work, but there's value in doing the fully remote concept. What would you
yeah,
say that you've missed out on that you're like, oh, I wish we had this, or
yeah,
has there been any of that?
yeah. I mean, the obvious is I'm in person.
Yeah.
Like if you're watching a video or listening to inflections of my voice, you probably don't think I'm a monotone guy sitting in the corner that only wants to look at a computer screen.
Yeah.
I love being around people. I love the energy that's around people. I love the high five chest bump moment when you land a new deal, or the excitement around somebody comes in and they announce they're pregnant or whatever, and like that's really
Mhm.
fun to cheer for people and celebrate
Yeah.
and be around people and kind of just get to know them differently. And that takes a lot of intentionality, like I mentioned earlier, kind of in the Zoom world or digital world.
Yeah.
And so I miss that. Like I often think of it probably once a week. I'll go, it'd be super cool if this team was all in the same city.
Yeah.
And so I miss that part. I feel like that part is something that I wish was around or wish was a little more
Hmm.
relevant. the idea of having a focus, like, hey, this is the only geographic area that you go after, is really appealing to me at this point. And so, like, that's super interesting. I think about that sometimes. I live my life based on 5 time zones. And
Yeah, that's
so
tough.
when a new employee would start, or when we were first building it, I mean, I'd work 6 to 6 because that was the only way I could get
You
anything
kind of
done.
have to, yeah.
Yeah, and so you're covering all the time zones, and we've gotten to the ability where we've put in a system and a
Mhm.
process to be able to handle that. But like that part is challenging, and sometimes I wish it was just like, oh, great, I get to clock in and clock out, in a location.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, I don't know if that. I mean, there's a couple of those. A lot of that's the time piece that would get removed, but at the same standpoint, I love being around people, and I think that's super important too. So yeah,
that's
there
great.
is pros and cons. You have to find out that people time elsewhere then if you don't have it built into kind of your company culture. So
Yeah. Well, I had a few, I appreciate that. I had a few listeners reach out to me that I just kind of told, hey, I was going to be talking to you about the remote environment. And
yeah,
one of the common questions that I got was, all right, so one of the issues that they've had when trying to find remote employees is kind of the opposite of the issue that you had. Maybe they live in a smaller town or maybe in a more easier place for cost of living, all that kind of stuff. And so the
yeah,
moment they open up their horizons for new employees beyond that area, all of a sudden they have to pay more for employees. And that just really rocks the boat. Have you seen
yeah.
that kind of consistently across the board, or do you feel like you kind of get a hit or miss about pay and benefits and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, it's a great question. I've got two answers. One is unequivocally yes, post 2020, end of
Mm,
2021, going into 2022.
yeah.
Prior to 2020, or prior to the pandemic, prior to shutdown, nope, it was great.
Wow.
You would find people where they're at, and you could kind of understand, like what their cost of living was where they're at and what jobs were paying there. And
Hmm.
that was fair to them because they were okay with that. I would say that's where like the whole everybody does remote now,
Yeah.
because pretty much everybody is quote unquote required to offer remote positions, and so you're going to get paid a lot more from Google or whatever the big tech
Right.
company is that has a huge budget,
Mm,
than we're going to be able to as a small business. So there's more competition for sure now. I think it gets harder. We've had numerous employees poached this year
yeah.
for quite a bit more money than we can handle.
Right.
And, that's normal anywhere. And so
Yeah.
you kind of have to just keep in mind, like, that's just a normal scenario for business. Does it happen more now? Yes and no. I mean, I think that's where the importance of creating a really great culture is, and that's where the importance of
Hmm.
creating a really great place that people actually want to work, and a place that's advocating for employees, and a place that is clients that they want to work for, and there's so many different aspects to that for sure. um, but I think, yeah, I mean, I think for sure, I would say it's a battle for sure, as far as like just making sure you're relevant, making sure you're
Right.
competitive. I mean, probably once a quarter we look at our benefits plans, and you can't compete with somebody that's $100 million in revenue, and able to pay
Yeah.
employees a certain amount. So I would say one of the things, and I think I learned this from Jay Owen. I think you had Jay on your podcast at
Yeah.
some point, and Jay's another agency owner, for those of you who might not know, based in Florida, and him and I have become buddies over the last number of years as well. And he talked about a lot. He's talked a lot about like the me versus me comparison versus the me,
Mm.
instead of the me versus you. And many of us play that comparison game, and many of us play that in business for sure. Of the oh, Clay bought this new house or this new car or hired this new person or whatever, and then it's like,
Yeah.
well, I haven't done that, and so Clay's better than I am, or and versus taking more that snapshot of, well, it's me versus me. It's, hey, am I better now than I was 6 months ago? And I've
Right.
been working on
Yeah.
these things, and really like focusing on that and not comparing yourself outwards. And so I think from a business and benefits and position in the market that you have, it's really important to go, well, it's me versus me, as well as it's apples to apples. So you can't really play the comparison game of, if someone goes and gets a job at a $100 million organization and you're a $1 million organization, yeah, you're going to lose them but you can't play that game and try to
Right.
compete in that level because you'll always lose when it's that big of a gap, And
Mm.
so I don't know. Yeah, there's a couple of thoughts around it. I think but it
Yeah.
also requires you to be pretty competitive. I mean, you've got to we probably pay people maybe a little bit more than the average as far as a local agency might be paying people. Um, so
No, that
yeah,
checks out. That checks out. And I think that's really helpful because there's a lot of fear, right? I
yeah,
mean, in general, there's a lot of fear in the economy, in business ownership right now about, okay, I mean, I have to raise prices to match inflation, but am I still going to have the business to match that? And
yeah,
how am I going to make sure that I can afford to even grow at that rate if employees' costs are continuing to go up? Do you
yeah,
feel like, this is, I think, my last question that I'll pull in
yeah.
from the listener. Do you feel like you've actually seen your expenses lower than what kind of the other guy, even though we said we're not going to compare, what the other guy might have by not paying for an office? Or do you just kind of reallocate the money you would normally pay for an office to pay for that retreat every year or something like that? What have you seen on that end?
Yeah, man, I wish, like from an expenses standpoint, I'd go in person with an office and lease payment any day of the week. I
Mm,
would say it's more expensive to have remote staff. And part of that, some of that's labor, and we kind of cover that a little bit.
yeah.
But I would say like the learning between hiring an employee, like our business is based in the state of Washington, but so then hiring an employee in Colorado or Texas or wherever, there's a whole new level of
Mm,
taxes that are required and payroll things that are required, unemployment things that are required, and workers' comp. I mean, there's so many different aspects to it that is super important to learn, but it is going to cost you a little bit of money to learn that and kind of put those
yeah.
things in place and set up new businesses in those states and whatnot. And and then we do, I mean, like every employee, a benefit we offer is that every employee does get we call it a productivity stipend every month. And so use it however you want. I mean, you can use it to buy an Audible account or Spotify. You can use it to pay for your internet bill, or your cell phone bill. I mean, tons of different things that you can do
That's
with
cool.
that. And so we've kind of, I guess put the money back into that to where, reality is if you had an office, you probably buy a desk and you might buy a monitor and a computer, and maybe it's, art on the walls, or whatever the things
Yeah.
are. And so we've kind of tried to reallocate what some of that stuff would cost. We've broken it out over months so that people would have access to it. But so I don't think it's much cheaper. I think you're paying for communication, you're paying for tools potentially a little different.
Mm.
Oftentimes I've talked to people, what's your most expensive tool? And I go, well, Zoom is pretty high up there. And they go, really? We only have one paid account. And I go, yeah, I have to have 30 paid accounts.
Oh my gosh.
And so that's those types of things. I mean, it's
Yeah.
pennies, comparatively to the overall concept of it.
Yeah.
But those add up real fast when you're required to function on digital tools and stuff differently than maybe you
Yeah.
are if you're in person. So I don't know. I don't want to scare anybody with saying it's more expensive, but I think it also depends on how you handle it too. So
Yeah, well, and frankly, I mean, the reality is you need to be investing in your team, whether
yeah,
it's remote or in person. And I love the way you have categorized it as just a stipend. I mean, I think that makes plenty of sense. So
sure. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. All right, so we've talked a lot about this concept of running a remote business.
Yeah.
You've done it for what, 7 years
8 years.
now? 8 years now?
Yeah.
So are you glad that you've done it? After doing it for 8 years. And if you're one
Yeah.
of Tyler's team members, just cover your ears as he responds to this.
Yeah.
No,
No, I
no.
mean,
After
it's
8 years,
funny.
you feel like it was worth it. Are you
Yeah.
happy you did it?
Well, I would say it's funny because it's like it's hard to separate are you glad you started a business like in general,
Sure. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so it's, yes, I'm glad I started a business. And I think from the remote standpoint, man, I've gotten to meet some really cool people.
Yeah.
And I would say in the last couple of years, whatever your religious point of view is, your political point of view is, all those types of things, man, it's super fun to have a window into different cultures every day. And
Hmm.
so I'm not really, I mean, I live in a bubble like everybody else
Yeah.
does, but I get to get out of that bubble probably, for 8 hours a day or more. Whether that's because I get comments of things going on, or,
Hmm.
natural disasters happen in a certain state and you go, man,
Yeah.
I've got an employee that lives down the block. Oh my gosh, what can we do?
Wow.
How do we help? And so I would say it's caused me to go like more of a national or bigger reach look or mindset
Mm,
comparatively to it's so easy to go. I live within 5 miles of my house.
yeah.
Kids go to school 5 miles of my house, grocery store, community, church, whatever the things are, and you never leave that. And all your news is there, and you really don't actually know what's going on in any
Mm,
other states where we live in a big country and there's a lot of cool
yeah.
stuff going on and a lot of hard stuff going on.
Yeah.
So I
That's
really
cool.
liked that. It's weird, but I really like that. As far as kind of getting to do that, I've got to meet some really cool people, which has been really fun. And then I think I've gotten to build an organization faster
Mm,
than doing it if I did it in person. I just think that there's seasons when it's been expensive, but seasons when it hasn't been, and
yeah.
seasons when you're kind of like, cool, let's just keep pouring fuel in that fire, and it keeps growing. And so I really have enjoyed it. I think it's really fun. I'm a classic entrepreneur, and so I'm constantly saying no to ideas in my mind or chasing squirrels and
Yeah.
that kind of thing. And so someday maybe I'll get to move on to something different. But I feel like I look back on the last 8 years and I'm pretty proud of what I've built. And there's lots of pain moments as well as you
Mm,
build an organization, but pretty proud of what I've built and pretty proud of the people that have been a part of the journey or continued on the journey from the beginning. That's been really fun for me too.
gosh, I
So
love that mindset. That's fantastic. All right, so a few more questions, and
yeah,
then I'll let you get back to your other Zoom calls today. So when we were hanging out, I guess maybe a month or so ago,
yeah,
in Nashville, you talked about this concept, and this is kind of switching away from the remote topic, but you
sure.
talked about this concept of being present,
Hmm.
and that's something that I guess is kind of pretty deep for a
Sure.
podcast, but.
Yeah.
Um, what does it mean to you to just be present with where you are, and why is it so
Hmm.
relevant to you, as kind
Hmm.
of the latest learning lesson as an entrepreneur who's been at it for 8 years
Sure.
and cranking and
Yeah.
growing? So
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good question. It's actually not that far off from the remote land. I think like technology and remote and all that stuff has actually caused a lot of disruption in most people's ability to be present.
mm,
We've all seen commercials or seen our kids or seen whatever walking down the street and they're just staring at your phone. There's so many other things going on around them.
yeah.
So I think it's just as relevant for that side as it is for me personally. Um, like I guess quick little story. I do this thing, and it's not a very big thing, but it's going to sound like it when I say it. I do this like net worth document every year,
Okay.
and it's very simple. It's super simple. It's on a spreadsheet. I'm one of those really weird people that have kept a budget and know where all of my personal dollars have gone since like '98, and I know how much money I spent on groceries 7 years ago and all that kind of stuff. So just please forgive me, y'all, and please give me grace here. But so anyway, I do this net worth document, and essentially it's super simple. It's like, what do you own now? What do you owe now? And then what's left over, kind of thing. But at the bottom of it is, how old are your kids and what grades are they in? And then it's what'd you get to do? And
Mm,
so like when I started this, 15, 16, I can't remember when I actually started, 05, I think. And every year I do it. And so that line at the bottom has gotten to grow. And like at the beginning, it was like, bought an iPod or whatever it was. And that was like the big thing that year, and then it was, oh, I got to go on a weekend getaway with my wife. And then it was, our kids were born, we bought a house, or, like it
mm,
keeps growing. It's like that list grows from, one thing to two to 10 to
mm,
50 to whatever. And so like it's been super interesting to kind of observe that. And then the line above that is, how old your kids are.
mm,
And I think one of the things that's been super impactful. So I have a 13-year-old and a 15-year-old girls, teenage girl land. I'm a girl dad. Many of you are probably rolling your eyes going, oh my gosh, that must be hard. It is, but I love it. And it's so fun. I love every season with my kids. So, but one of the things I noticed with my kids is, man, I don't have very much time left. I've got a year
mm,
left with one of my kids. Because if you don't have a kid yet that has a driver's license, they kind of have their own social agenda the minute they have a driver's license. So you're
mm,
going to see them less and less and less. And so obviously they're around and you build a relationship with them ideally, and they still like you when they're 25. But I've kind of just watched the ability of a business and a life to take over your brain. Even though you might be sitting at the dinner table, you have no idea what's actually being talked about because there's a 1,500 other
mm,
things going on in your brain. And so I think for me, that was really eye opening to kind of observe those things all mixed together. So less time with your kids, you got to make it count and build some memories with them, as well as, hey, you want to be present and see what's going on.
Mm.
And so that was kind of the initial piece of it that kind of got me, I suppose, my attention, if you will.
Yeah.
And then I've really enjoyed watching it play out, because I
Mm.
think what's super funny is everyone's been on Zoom calls or FaceTime calls or whatever at this point, when they're looking at their phone or checking their email or
Oh yeah.
not paying attention to the call, right?
Yeah.
And so I think, like, when you see that, I mean, most people, what do you think? You're like, oh my gosh, they're not paying attention. They're glazed over. They, whatever. And then you're like, that's just not, I personally don't think that's like super respectful. Do I struggle with that? Sure, of course. Do I struggle with the text message coming in or all these things and all this stuff happening? But I think it's important to like have it front and center of like, well, I'm trying to be present. I'm focused on
Yeah.
this 60 minutes that I'm with Clay right now, and this is all that matters. Sure, there's a million other things going on. Something might be on fire, but I'm focused on this because this is what I committed to.
Mm.
And so I think that's been that way in lots of different areas of my life too. I think when you and I were talking a month ago when we were together, I was talking about kind of like this intentionality thing I'm doing with my kids. And it's like the concept of, my kids are a little bit older, but yet I still really try hard to, give them a kiss, tuck them in at night.
Yeah.
Super basic. It used to be 5 books and you rock them to sleep. And now it's just, you give them a kiss on the forehead and, high five or whatever.
Yeah.
But I've tried really hard to go, man, I'm going to try really hard to sit on the end of their bed and ask them how their day was and talk to them intentionally for 5 minutes with no distractions. I know that that's kind of, 5 minutes really, but man, it's been super impactful for me. Maybe I'm the
Mm.
one getting something out of it, but that's okay. And it's just, I think that presence and like the specific intentionality kind of mixed together has been really helpful for me. And it's caused me to go, I live in the future. I live 3 years down the road. I'm constantly moving my target I'm chasing on every area of my life, whether it's fitness to nutrition to thing that I want to buy to business growth to whatever, right? All of us do that if you're an entrepreneur for the most part. And
Yeah.
so the idea of like going, those are all there. I still think about them, but man, I'm going to work really hard to just go, what's going on in this moment? And how do
Mm.
I just enjoy what's going on in this moment? Because man, there's no guarantee that I'm going to have the next moment or wake up tomorrow or
Mm.
whatever. I really hope I do. And I'm trying my best to be healthy enough to do that.
Yeah.
But I think that's been kind of like some of the learnings from it / benefits from it. So.
Yeah. It's moments like that that really kind of force you into a reality check when you're and I mean when you're looking at the past 15 years and you're like, "Oh wow. This
Yeah.
is this is it. This is 15 years."
Yeah.
And sometimes there's moments where you're like, we're waiting on a test result from a lab,
Yeah.
and we think we know what the response is going to be, and it's scary, and you start to view things very differently, and you want to be
Mm.
very intentional with the moments that you
Yeah.
have. And so, why wait until something bad happens?
Yeah.
Just be present, be intentional. I love that. I
Yeah.
absolutely love that. So,
Yeah.
with all that being said, what would you want? What would you leave the audience with today?
Yeah.
As just kind of a, all right, now that you heard all this about being remote, about being intentional, about just living a life that is a little bit different than most, what would you
Sure.
encourage everyone to do?
Yeah, I'm going to be like a little more transparent on this one. I'm not going to be able to
Mm.
say this out of, hey, I've accomplished this and done this and I'm the
Mhm.
best at it. I've mastered it. And so you guys should do it too. I'm going to say it more of like, this is what I'm working on and I really see a value in it. And so I'm really trying to narrow my focus. I think that it's so easy to scroll through Instagram and go, I should invest in crypto. I should be buying real estate. I should be renting Airbnbs and re-putting them on Airbnb. I should be running. I should be, like you, I
Yeah.
mean, what, right? Like, and I just scrolled for 30 seconds and I feel bad about not doing enough. And so I think there's so much of our, I guess I'll call it culture or popular culture, whatever, that is pushing in so many different directions. And oftentimes I've found myself doing a lot of things because I just assume that's what you're supposed to do.
Hmm.
Versus it being something that it's like, oh, this is, and I use this term a lot. And so forgive me if it's weird, but this is what lifts my heart. Like, this is the stuff that I get excited about, find joy in, find peace in, get excited about pursuing, spending my time and look forward to. And so I think I'm trying really hard to focus. I'm trying really hard to go, man, I'm going to say no to more things. I'm
Yeah.
saying no to more things now. I'm saying no to different types of meetings that, maybe these would be helpful, but I'm not sure. And trying really hard to kind of be more of a gatekeeper on my time and that kind of thing. And so I'd say I'm talking about it like personally, but I would also say I'm working on it business wise. When you run a larger team and you oftentimes get pulled into all of the, I'm going to call it drama, people stuff, team building stuff, problems, challenges. And that's all good. And probably you're in a leadership role because you're good at solving problems, and that most people are that are in those roles. But I'd also say make sure you're spending enough time on the people and the stuff that's going to actually grow your business or push your business forward, because it's really easy to get that focus flipped or flip-flopped. And oftentimes I feel like I've spent most of my time in the last year has been on the challenge, drama, problem solving, and way less time on what's going to actually get us to the next level. Right. And so I think for me, that's been a learning of observation piece, but that's something I'm kind of really in the thick of right now, trying to kind of figure out how to not be pulled in so many different directions. And it's definitely a discipline, and it's not necessarily super comfortable all the time, because I feel like I disappoint people a lot in it. So,
well, I appreciate that. That's deep, and that's a really solid way to wrap up this episode. So, Tyler, how can people engage with you? I know we didn't talk too much about Loanfer in regard to what you do,
sure.
but how can people engage with you after listening to this episode?
Totally. Go check out our website, loanfercreative.com. You'll find out some more what we do, marketing agency, help people grow their brands. And we're really focused heavily at this point on the customer journey and removing friction in the sales and marketing process. So check it out there. We're always creating new content there as well that we hope is helpful for people. I'm probably the most active on LinkedIn, so check that out. Tyler is my first name, and last name is Pigott, P as in Paul, Igott. It's all that word. Check me out on LinkedIn. And then I also run a coaching business. I help marketing agencies that are kind of like that 500K to 100 or to 1.5 million kind of scale and get to the next level, and a lot of process implementation, sales systems, all of that stuff. And so it's my first and last name.com is that coaching website. So one of those three ways, or just carrier pigeons or come to the Pacific Northwest, you'll find me here probably. So
awesome. Well, Tyler, thanks so much for your time and for joining the Good Business Show today. And we'll see everybody next week on Good Business. If you like this podcast, then please consider subscribing now and share it with your friends, family, and any other business leaders who you believe would find value in the topics we discuss. You can learn more about each guest, any of the resources that we discuss at my website, www.clayvaughn.com. I also want to give a shout out to Rocket Fuel, our show sponsor. Rocket Fuel is an amazing CRM that has allowed my companies to grow exponentially. In fact, one of my companies went from converting 30% of its leads to converting 80% of its leads without seeing a reduction in lead volume. So I highly recommend you check out Rocket Fuel. And we'll see you next week on Good Business.